I feel like you've created twins in an alternate universe.
Yeah, in a way, yeah. Okay, Zoom says being streamed on YouTube. As soon as I get the visual actually from YouTube, then we can kick things off. Wig, would you mind doing the honors to start us off? That way I can just focus on the tech parts for the first few minutes.
Yeah, sure.
All right, go right ahead.
Do you want to do brief introductions of the committee first and then?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, so I'm Wig Zamor. I'm Wig Zamor, came on about the same time as Stefan, and live in Somerville, and that's about it. Who would like to go next? How about Len?
Sure. Excuse me. I'm Leonard Diggins, one of the co-chairs for the Capital Investment and Finance Subcommittee, and I live in East Arlington.
Great, thank you. I'm sorry.
No, that's it. Fine.
Okay,
thanks.
and Craig.
Hi, Craig Leskowski. Public member, and I live in Milton.
Thank you, and Jacob.
Hello, I'm Jacob, public member. I live in Arlington, but coming to you from Appleton, Wisconsin today.
Wow. And you've got quite a backdrop. So Stefan, do we want to see if there's any public comments?
Yep, absolutely. I recognize Blake from CTPS. I just promoted to a panelist. There we go. We've got two folks in as attendees. Do either of you want to give anything for the public comment period? If in that case, raise your hand and I will let you to unmute. And Sylvia, if you're part of an organization representing, I don't know, either CTPS, MPO, that kind of thing, let us know and I'll promote you to panelists. I don't know who is calling it on the phone. I don't recognize the number ending in 6289, but can either one of you, if you want to speak, raise your hand using the Zoom function for raise hand? And you don't have to, but if you'd like to make a comment, let me know, or you can type something in the Zoom chat as well. Oh, hi, Sylvia, great. Then since you're with the MBTA, I will promote you to panelists. Excellent. Nice to have you.
And Blake, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Blake. Can you hear me? Am I coming through?
Okay. Sounds good.
Perfect.
And I'm a transit planner / analyst at the Boston Region MPO, also known as CTPS, as we're called, our staff are. And I currently live in Framingham. So
terrific.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So at this point, we should probably move into the main feature, right? Because there's no public comments or.
Yep. We're actually a little ahead of schedule since it's only 10 after 5. Oh, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Stefan Wunsch. I'm the co-chair of the committee along with Wig, and also I'm the co-chair of the subcommittee on marketing, communications, and operations. I'll just make a last call to the person on the phone. Raise your hand or type in the Zoom chat. Oh, you can't type in the Zoom chat. You're on the phone. My apologies. I think you can raise your hand with, I think it's *9 or *7. I apologize if I'm not giving you the proper. Oh, there we go. Hand raised. I will allow you to talk. Go ahead. Introduce yourself and feel free to make a public comment. Oh, and I have to ask you to unmute. There we go. Let me try that again. Ask to unmute. You should get a message on the phone saying to unmute, press something. There we go. We can hear you.
All right. Hi, my name's Amira Patterson. I am the new transportation planner at the MBTA Advisory Board. I'm having problems with the passcode to get into Zoom, so just bear with me, but I am here. I am present and excited to hear from you all.
That's awesome. Then I'm going to promote you to a panelist without further ado.
I also had trouble with the passcode. I tried to enter getting online with a different device. The link worked just fine. So if you use
Yep.
the link, it works just fine. But for some reason, when I put the meeting code into the password, it didn't work. So
You probably missed my email from yesterday saying that I changed the passcode. It previously had said rock member, but I changed it because it goes out to everybody, not just members. So I made the passcode different. It's in email, and I think from now on, Len, we can probably include that in the agenda. So apologies for not making that more visible, Craig. Yeah, go ahead, Jacob.
Since I'm doing most of speaking of meeting links and stuff, next time the committee is meeting, I'll shoot you an email. I might want to put a link to the Zoom or something on the Twitter account so that people can find us that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, we will see.
Cool. And I just found Amira's name. So, okay, we've got Amira renamed.
So
right.
before someone formally introduces Melissa, I hope this won't embarrass anybody, but one of my favorite baby announcements of all time, Melissa has a son named Kendall, and it came out with a picture of the Kendall Square station and Melissa and Harry and Kendall. And it's the cleverest reverse takeover I think I've ever seen. So I just want to note that. And who would like to introduce the Better Bus Project? I think Len did the work to set this up, but Stefan, you might be appropriate too.
I'll introduce Melissa. I'll let you give your current title because it seems like you've been wonderfully and very just deserved getting promoted. Seems like every year or so, which is awesome. Melissa is joining us to give us a recap of the August meeting while we were all vacationing and away from rock business. The Better Bus meeting was, I think, in my personal opinion, hands down, one of the best online Zoom meetings since the start of all the virtual meetings in the beginning of the pandemic. It covered virtually everything to do with the future of bus. And now my expectation, I told Melissa earlier, is we don't expect you to give a full recap because there was every single department involved with bus. So my idea is that Melissa would recap what she thinks is most important for us to know that came out of that Better Bus meeting, particularly if there was any collection of comments from the general public in the breakout rooms, because the Zoom breakout rooms for that event were phenomenal, but also not recorded in Zoom. So they're not available for watching after the fact. Melissa, take over. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction. I have not been promoted every year, but I am the Senior Director of Service Planning. I've been at the MBTA now for 21 years. I think I've held 4 or 5 positions in that time, so you can do the math. But I go way back with the ROC. Our office used to help kind of administer the ROC. So for a while, we were going through a lot of these meetings. We've since had other folks take over that functionality. But the August Better Bus meeting is what I'm here to talk about, which was a very cool meeting. It was the first time that I had participated in a meeting in that format where we had 9 mini presentations, each talking about a different aspect of the bus network and how we want to improve that. So collectively, these were all about sort of we're calling it the Better Bus Project, sort of a rebranding of our bus transformation program, but talking about every aspect of bus, whether it was my presentation, which was about the upcoming, at the time it was upcoming fall service changes that were sort of continuing with our COVID recovery. But we also had presentations on the bus network redesign. We had presentations on bus fleet, the future of battery electric buses and other garage changes. We had presentations on accessibility. There was actually a really cool video in the accessibility that was showing kind of our next generation wheelchair securement, which is much more automated and much faster and can cut down the time it takes to do securement. We had presentations on e-ink signs and how we can get real-time information out to bus stops, even to places that don't necessarily have power. They're solar powered, so you don't need to find power, and they're cellular, so you don't need data connection. So it can really make the installation of the new e-ink signs with real-time schedule information much easier. We had presentations on the Silver Line extension, and I'm sure I'm missing one. There were 9 of them overall, and everyone got 5 minutes. But it was really a great way to get kind of a taste of a lot of the different initiatives that are underway here at the MBTA. And then we had different breakouts for each of those topics so that people could ask more questions. So I have familiarity with the questions that I was answering about the fall schedule changes and sort of COVID related schedule changes. But I did get some kind of crib notes, crib sheets off of some of our other folks who had been hosting different pieces as well. Now, if you haven't seen it already, the main presentation with again, we had 9 mini presentations plus some introductory material. That's on our website, so you can poke around and find the bus transformation, Better Bus project, and you can find the link to the meeting that happened back in August. It was the 26th, and the YouTube is still up of the main presentation. As Stefan mentioned, the breakout sessions were not recorded, but the main sessions were. So in terms of the feedback that I've heard about, I was in the breakout session to talk about the sort of forging ahead response and fall service changes. Which everyone wanted to talk about their route. So it very much depended on where people were coming from. We had some folks who were coming from the Fenway neighborhood where the 55 bus is very much a concern. That's a route that had been suspended, and we've restored midday service so far because there's a lot of seniors that had communicated about the importance of that for kind of their mobility and getting to doctor's appointments and shopping. Other folks are other populations we expected would be able to, head to Brookline Ave, which is, within about a quarter mile to access other bus service that connects folks over to the Green Line. But it's really the seniors that we were most concerned about in our kind of limited resources that we had to work with, that we wanted to make sure that we were able to provide that connection. So we'd heard from 55 riders. We heard from some Newton folks. The 52 bus is another route that had been suspended. And we restored, I think it was last summer, and then we actually improved the frequency a little bit in the fall. And there were some comments about how it connects to certain, there's Oak Hill Middle School, Brown Middle School in Newton, and then there's also Alvernia High School, where we're trying to serve these 3 different school populations, each with different bell times, but with one route, and we're trying to kind of provide the best connectivity that we can with a bus that comes every 45 minutes. So we're sort of kind of threading a needle there. We had some questions. There had been someone from the Armont neighborhood who had questions about the 84 bus that still is suspended. We've actually modified the 78 bus to provide the same service pattern all day. And that's sort of I'll say a sneak preview of some of the concepts that we're thinking about in the bus network redesign process, because we're focusing more on having simplified service patterns that perhaps operate all day. There's still going to be some variance, but the degree to which we have customized variants where, during rush hours, you have to wait for the bus in one area, but in that same neighborhood, the bus will take you to a different area at a different time of day. We're trying to simplify that and instead have kind of simplified legible routes that are as frequent as possible and minimize the number of variants. So sometimes we do have variants for specific populations when needed. So that's those were most of the comments in our Forging Ahead group. We also had a group that had been talking about bus network redesign, and that one, the service planning team is very plugged into the bus network redesign. So I debriefed with Caroline Vaness about that particular group to talk about some of the questions that they had. And they were all over trying to identify, specific questions about how we are going to, interface with other RTAs in suburban locations. For example, I think there was somebody in her group that probably should have been the Forging Ahead group, because I've been talking about the 351 changes as we just restored the 351 back in August. And again, with this theme of simplifying and more legible, we actually turned the 351 into a local route that it does require a time transfer with the 350. So it's a transfer, but it comes every 20 minutes and matches the frequency of the 350. And the transfer location is at the 3rd Ave in Burlington, right in front of the Wegmans. So there's a place to, use the restroom and get coffee. It feels like a transit hub without actually being a transit hub. Though they do have a quite handsome bus shelter in front of their grocery store there on 3rd Ave in Burlington. So we had some folks who commented about that. If you haven't been plugged in, there was also a breakout room to talk about the Silver Line extension. So that is looking in particular about how we can have the Silver Line go beyond its current terminus in Chelsea, the SL3 that just recently opened to Chelsea. And how can we better connect Chelsea to Everett? How can we better connect Everett into Boston for high frequency service? So, and actually that topic is why I'll be having to leave shortly, because we have our Silver Line public meeting tonight that I'm going to have to prepare for. But that's a very exciting project. So if you haven't already, mbta.com/SLX to read up more on that project. And see, what else did we have? Those are the ones that were nearest and dearest to my heart. But if there are other specific questions, or there were a lot of questions about fleet and electrification. This is one that I'm not quite as conversant on. Scott Hamway is our fleet and facilities coordinator. But there were a lot of questions about both, how quickly are we planning to transition to battery electric buses to replace diesel hybrids, which there's a snippet on our website if you poke around. So I don't want to misstate the date, but it's, I'll say, a couple decades away, I think. Don't quote me on that, since the timelines for things like new garages and new fleets are a bit longer than the route changes in the world that I usually dwell in. And then also there were some questions about North Cambridge, in particular the trackless trolley buses, and the time frame for a possible pilot. It hasn't been finalized and funded yet, but it's possible that that would be happening soon. And it's possible even that trackless trolleys might stop operating as soon as this winter, not actually because of the garage conversion to BEVs that is still, we're working on getting funding for, but there's actually a number of construction projects both in Watertown and in Cambridge that are going to be affecting the 71 and 73 at some point soon, potentially as early as December with our winter schedules. Not finalized yet though.
Any questions for Melissa from anyone? Or comments? Go right ahead.
Yeah, so I got a couple things. The first thing is just a comment, and I'm sure you know this. There are some super fans of the old electrified trolleys in Cambridge, and they hound me about keeping those. But I don't have a question there. I just thought I would pass that on. The second question I have is a simple Somerville question, and then I'll come around to SLX. So the simple Somerville question is, a lot of people use Highland Ave to get in between Leechmere and Davis. And the 88 and 90 always come at the same time. And wouldn't it make sense on the Highland Ave stretch, which is the biggest run for both, to have them split instead of at the same time?
That is a great question. And I too live in Somerville, right off of Highland Ave. And I'm very familiar with the phenomenon of bus bunching and the two buses, and then it's like 30 minutes until the next bus comes along.
Right.
That one's tricky because they actually have different frequencies, and it's difficult to coordinate two buses. If one of them is every, say, 30 minutes, the 88 tends to be more frequent, so it tends to be like 20 or 30 minutes. And the 90 is because it's a longer route and the number of buses, you know, generally a little less frequent. So it might be every 35 or 40 minutes. And it's difficult to coordinate them when they are very different. So I think as some of you may recall from Forging Ahead, we actually had some proposals to eliminate some routes when the Green Line extension opened, but then those proposals were shelved, and actually kind of any decisions were kind of pushed off toward bus network redesign.
That makes sense.
One of the proposals that had been there was to eliminate the 88 and to take the unique portion of the 88, so the like Clarendon Hill to Davis, add that to the 90 and make it run more frequently like the 88. But then CARES Act 2 funding came through and that concept went away. But like one thing that I liked about that is concentrating our resources on one route makes it easier to coordinate, whereas having two routes with, like, we'll call it like different periods or different frequencies, because it depends on the length of a route, and it's very difficult to get them to coordinate well without losing some efficiency. So I think as part of bus network redesign, we're still working on the maps, so this isn't finalized, but we are looking at sort of simplifying it to have one corridor, perhaps similar, but a lot of the routes are just similar, but doing different things because it is sort of a blank sheet redesign. So it may not be exactly the same as today's 90 mashed up with today's 88. It might be something even a little bit different that resembles those, and who knows, keeps going to Chelsea for all I know. So it's a little up in the air still. It
makes perfect sense to defer anything till after the Green Line opens and then to rethink it then. Completely agree with that. If it happened to have two buses on part of the route in the future, you know, maybe just look at the times of day where their schedules did almost perfectly coincide and not the rest of it. I certainly get the difference in the lengths because I use them both. The other question I have, and this is a longer term question, you might not be the right person, but some others on this committee know this is a concern of mine, but I would really like to see a lifetime analysis of service like SLX, BRT, as compared with light rail and subway with regard to total sustainability. You know, life sustainability over the life of the asset. And I just am always struck, and people have heard me mention this before, by an example like the Orange Line, which is a little past its fleet date, but effectively it had one fleet for 40 years and it carried an awful lot of people per day, and it's all electric. It doesn't have a battery penalty. And I just have a hard time imagining, without seeing the numbers, that can compete with SLX type service. I'm really skeptical about the chance for that.
That's a fair question. That's a bit out of my area of expertise. So
yeah, that's fair too, but maybe a CTPS study or something. You know, it's not a short question, but I'm really concerned because where the SLX type services are going are in communities that are often denser, much more surface transportation polluted, and much more environmental justice percent of the population. And I don't like the comparison. If SLX turns out to not be as good, I don't like the comparison with most of the subways and light rail being in Boston and Cambridge, and lesser assets being elsewhere. Yeah, and not having the same density of that type service in other communities that may be denser and more EJ intense. That's a really big concern of mine. And I'd love to see an analysis, not a debate, but start with some data, just the way CTPS often does, and you do at the T.
That's fair. I'll have to take that one back and figure out the right avenue for that.
Okay. And one last thing on that. If you look at the opportunity zones in the core, 80% of them are lower Mystic and up to Lynn. I mean, it's really huge economic development area that's set aside, that doesn't always get brought into the discussion, but in my mind, maybe calls for integrated thinking between the transit providers, the modernization of the jobs in our economy, and the environmental justice populations. So that's not all on your plate, Melissa. I just wanted to point that out, if it's okay.
Melissa's only got another minute or two, I think, at the most. Any other questions or quick comments? If not, from anybody else, I'm going to ask one quick thing. I'm looking for any signs of nobody else. Looks like just a very quick thing, Melissa. Does anything jump out in your mind as something that came up either at that public meeting or since then, which changes the direction of any one of those things that was presented? In other words, is there any breaking news to do with the better bus overall? And if not, no problem. No is an answer.
Yeah, one of our pieces of breaking news is that our hiring is not in a good place right now, specifically for bus operators. So anyone who rides, especially certain buses like the 77 and the 32 or the 111, might see a lot of drop trips these days. I just wanted to sort of flag that. We're actually looking at how we can reduce some service for the winter, which was not supposed to be part of our Forging Ahead narrative. We were supposed to be building back. But this is a really hard time to hire new bus operators. This was hard pre-COVID, and take that to the nth degree with COVID. And this is also not limited to the MBTA. Like, New York City has been on the front page with the number of operators that they need for their system, which dwarfs ours. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of mention, we recognize drop trips are much, much, much higher than we thought they were going to be now. This also, during COVID, there had been a period when we suspended hiring before the CARES Act funding came in. And then when hiring did resume, because of physical distancing requirements, instead of having the usual ratio of trainees to an instructor, we had half as many because they needed more space to sort of spread out on the bus. So our hiring got throttled on that. We've since gone back to kind of regular trainees, but it's just difficult to find people who want to be drivers right now. So anyway, that's something that we're working through. We're working on hiring up, which is like the solution that we're looking for, but that means that kind of until we get those people, we're kind of temporarily making some cuts. We're not suspending new routes or anything like that. It's going to be, the bus that comes every 5 minutes will be every 6, or the bus that comes every 10 minutes will be 11, sort of those like minor changes. And actually the one saving grace is that with Delta variant, ridership is down. We thought it was going to be a big rebound in September, and it hasn't really, which perhaps is a bit of a silver lining, I'll say, because if everybody came back, we'd be perhaps a bit more crowded, or a lot more people would be waiting for their buses right now. So not great news, unfortunately, but it is
what about retention, Melissa? What about retention of bus drivers?
Also something there is concern about. Usually we see a flurry of retirements in kind of November, December, as people kind of look at their annual plans. We did just have some recent kind of bonuses go out. So hopefully that will help to improve morale for the folks who are already in the door. I think the biggest hang up right now is getting more folks in the door.
Well, I was thinking about the newer drivers because I think those split shifts are really hard on people. I mean, and I know that the newer drivers get the split shifts. I mean, and I don't know if anything can be done about that. I mean, if you're noticing like lower retention with the newer people, might want to explore. I mean, doing something with those split shifts because even before,
that actually is something we are looking at doing for the winter to sort of, instead of, this is going to be way in the weeds, I'm going to apologize in advance, but instead of having split shifts where you have like part-timers who have, we call it 13-hour spreads because they work the AM peak, then they have like 5 to 7 hours off in the middle of the day, and then they work the PM peak. We're going to try, we still need to cover the peaks because that's the price of doing business when we serve people who still have certain commuting patterns. If we only ran, like weekend service all the time, that tends to be very flat work where you can make more straight days and rather than having these split shifts. But we are experimenting with kind of promoting some of those part-timers to full-timers and having 10-hour days, because that's one of the other kind of day types in our arsenal where people would work, 5 hours in the morning, maybe have 3 hours off in the middle of the day, and then another 5 hours. Still covers the peak, but then they get 10 hours of pay instead of only 6 hours of pay as a part-timer. And then they also would get a bonus day off per week because you get 10 hours, you only have to work 4 days to get your 40. So that's something we're gonna try doing and see. It still means that people have the same kind of outside time, but we think it would be more appealing than having the part-time, and they also get a little bit extra bonus because full-timers get a bonus for spread, whereas part-timers do not.
Yep, sounds good to me. But then I'm sure you've asked them, and so they can tell you whether they think that's a good idea. Okay, so I'm glad to hear that you're working with that because that's been bothersome to me for a long time. So thanks for that feedback. Appreciate it.
But great question. Not many folks get into the weeds like that. So. Any last questions?
Thank you, Melissa, so much. Jacob, go ahead, as long as it's quick.
Yes. I read on Streets blog that there was a draft map of new high-frequency bus routes that was shared with advocates and some other folks the other day. Do you still have that map?
It's still a draft because we're changing things as we speak. But that will be released more broadly shortly. I don't have the exact time frame. I'd have to check with Caroline on that. We were aiming for Christmas, but I don't want to say the wrong thing because I know some of our time frames were slipping. But it was very draft, very subject to change because we're still a little over budget. So we didn't want to get folks too excited about it in case we had to like take something off the map that is currently on the map. So.
Thank you, Melissa. And I was going to say thank you, particularly on a night when you've got a 6 o'clock event for the Silver Line Extension. That's the run tonight, right?
That's tonight. Yep.
Excellent. And Eric's the manager for that?
That is, I'm blanking.
That's okay.
Oh,
I'm blanking. If it's not Eric, I'm blanking too. Don't worry about it. Okay. Anyway, please wish them all well. Tell them I'm sorry that I couldn't be there if that's appropriate or just internally. I'm going to watch the video online. Thank you again.
Super. Good to see so many familiar faces. Bye all.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Take care.
And by the way, speaking of familiar faces and new faces, Amira, welcome aboard. This is your first time. We did a little round of introductions, but that was before you had connected on video. And also, I just realized I should give a chance for Sylvia to say hi since she's with the agency, and also Karen on the phone. Do you want to say hi? And I mean, I'll hit the ask to unmute Karen just in case you want to check your microphone for anything later. Do you want to just say hi, Karen, first, and then I'll give Sylvia a chance to say hi if you want or not, and then Amira. You don't have to, Karen. No problem. Oh, there we go.
Hello. Hello, this is Karen. Happy to be here.
Excellent. Coming through loud and clear. Sylvia, do you want to say hi? It's completely optional. You don't have to, but feel free. It's great to have you here.
Hi. Obviously, my name is Silvia Castaños. I am the Spanish-speaking community liaison for the MBTA. I work with Anthony. So
awesome. Great to have you. We've known Anthony for a long, long time, and we're thrilled that he's gotten promoted up. And great to have you. I'm sure it's great working with him. And Amira, welcome aboard. Do you want to take a few minutes and actually, besides an introduction, tell us what kind of things are on your plate, not only for your specialties, but also what makes you tick, basically? What are your key areas, not only in profession, but also just of interest?
All right. Well, thank you so much for the platform. And I apologize for the delay with trying to get into the Zoom meeting. I did call in. Let me see. Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear. Sounds
okay,
great.
It said I'm muted, so I didn't know.
You're all set. Yep. Working great.
So I've actually been involved with the MBTA advisory board since 2013. So a long time coming, working with Deborah Gall, the office manager at the MBTA, Brian Kane, who is currently the executive director. And I worked very closely under Paul Regan, for those who have been here longer enough to know him. He is now retired, so congratulations to him. But I am a long-term born and raised resident of Boston. I currently live in Brookline. And my passion is the people, representation for the people, which is something that we hold very close and dear to us at the MBTA Advisory Board, working with 76 different cities and towns that receive MBTA service and being more of their representation and voice. So I do a lot of community outreach. I do a lot of meeting follow-ups. So I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to meet every one of you and hope to work closely in the future with potential different, I'm sorry, my cat's in the corner kind of falling.
It's okay.
But working closely with all cities and towns and you guys that help and work closely with the communities. I've also worked with the AmeriCorps in different social justice work. So I take it very close to my heart, just the work of the people.
Very cool. Thank you for that. Just a crazy quick question, because you're in Brookline. Do you happen to know Sarah Kaplan, who works for the city as an ADA coordinator?
Yes, I'm actually getting in touch with her. Brian has actually sent me her information. We're setting up a meeting. I haven't officially met her, but I have outreached.
Awesome. Sarah's a friend of mine from when she used to live in Lynn. She had to move away to a more accessible apartment, but please tell her I said hi and I miss seeing her on the train.
I will mention your name, definitely.
If the Rock ever needs to have a wheel mobility and accessibility representative, I think Sarah is it would be our go-to person. Okay, cool. So we're a little ahead of schedule because Melissa had to jump off to the GLX meeting. So before we get into subcommittee reports, very ahead of schedule, is there any other more pressing topics that we want to tackle, or any other questions for Amira or even Sylvia? Oh, Carl, I'm sorry, Carl, we didn't give you a chance to speak and say hi, introduce yourself to Amira and Sylvia and Blake.
Hey, good evening. Carl Seglin, member of the Writer Oversight Committee, and glad that bus service has gotten attention, especially in the August call. That was amazing to hear. I hope it happens more regularly. Thanks.
Thanks, Carl. Any, like I said, we can go into the subcommittee reports if people want, or any new topics that are pressing before we get into the more routine committee business.
I'm okay if the meeting ends early.
Yeah, I have to admit, I mean, if we do finish up very ahead of schedule, unless there's anyone from the public who posts something in the YouTube chat, which I always encourage people to do if people are watching. Yeah, we could conceivably end early and then switch over if people wanted to the GLX meeting that's starting at 6 o'clock. Okay,
it's
so,
SLX.
Thank you. Yes, GLX is almost done. That's right. SLX. Thank you, Wig.
Yes, I agree. That's right. And nice to see Carl here as well. And to meet Amira too. Thank you.
Very nice to meet you all, including Sylvia, Carl, Wig, Len. We know each
So let's maybe head over to the subcommittee meetings.
That sounds good. If you don't mind going first, Len, that'll give me a chance to queue up my notes.
Sure. And we had as our guests Amira and Brian, and the main focus was to see if we could get back to collaborating with the advisory board, because at the beginning of the ROC, the advisory board played a pretty big role. We actually met at the advisory board's office for probably the better part of the first year as we put together the bylaws. And then the advisory board kind of faded from the scene, not in an uninterested way. I think it felt that it had done what it was supposed to do, and then just kind of stepped out of the way and let the ROC take off on its own. But so let me just stop there. Now, the advisory board itself, it has been reinvigorated since Brian Kane has taken over, and it's really working hard on building its membership and getting more active. And so I'm thinking that it would be a good time, for us to work with the advisory board, collaborate with them, offer our services, for lack of a better word, or maybe I should rephrase that and say offer ourselves, make ourselves more accessible to them for whatever they need. If it's help with reaching out, if it's more like being a resource group or focus group, whatever they want us to do with them. I am seriously wanting to work to build the membership of the Rider Oversight Committee across more communities. I know that the advisory board is working on that, and also the advisory council. So I think this is an opportunity to work with all three groups, and I think that is much more feasible now than it was before COVID, because now we are meeting remotely, and the advisory board is planning to meet remotely for the foreseeable. I suspect that'll be the case with us. Although we haven't formalized that, but even if that isn't the case, I'm sure there will be a remote component to what we do. So that will make it, I think, more reasonable to ask people to work with us. So that was the main incentive for reaching out to the advisory board, and it seems like the advisory board is on board with that to an even greater degree. It's on board with that, but also on board with collaborating with us to a greater degree than I expected, because I wasn't expecting Amira to become, at least prospectively, a regular participant. And so I think if she is, it's going to be incumbent upon us to make it worth her while. Although she may bring a lot to the table to help us do that. So I'm really looking forward to her and her energy and her ideas. And so that was the main part of the agenda. And the second part was we did a quick little review of the bus 28 pilot, free pilot, and primarily looking at the metrics for it, and I could rattle them off, but I'm not going to at this point because we just want to keep an eye on what comes out of the study. The metrics seem interesting. I mean, it's hard to imagine how they will measure some of them, but the ridership one should be easy to measure, and so it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. So let me just see if I can pop up the agenda. Oh, I'm trying to remember what else we did. So the last thing we covered was the update on RTAC, and that pretty much involves an update on me. And I am still trying to decide whether I'm going to run for chair again. I mean, I'm completing my second year as chair, and the only reason I am not considering running again is because there is a very good chance that I will be chair of the Arlington Select Board. And right now, Arlington is an at-large member on the MPO, and technically the person representing Arlington on the board, or the person at the board meetings for Arlington, is representing the chair of the select board. And if I were to be on the board, well, I would be there as the representative from RTAC, but still the person taking the Arlington seat would be representing me. And so it's a little funky. So I personally don't see a problem with it because I'm very much a regional player, and I actually see the separation of roles is very clear. I mean, I wouldn't be there representing Arlington. So if I were there as a select board member and someone else was there representing me, then that would be two double representation. But I certainly get the optics of it. And so I have yet to talk with legal, MBPC or MPO legal. I think it's probably MBPC legal, to see how that would play out. But Arlington is running again for the at-large seat, so it's a little presumptuous when you say that Arlington's going to get that seat. And if it does, well, I wouldn't become chair until April. And so I just have some thinking to do about that. So we pretty much talked about that. The other thing we didn't talk about, but I'll mention to you all now, is that the MPO has out for review it proposed policy for handling cost overruns of projects. And I was on the ad hoc committee that worked on that. And I think we came up with an interesting solution. It just was caused by the fact that we had significant enough overruns on the currently programmed projects that we had no money to allocate this year. And so we're trying to prevent that happening. And so there are three ways that we are approaching it. One is to make sure that projects are at the 25% design phase before we program them, because the analysis of the cost overruns or increase in costs has shown that when projects are, the biggest increase in projects come when they go from the PRC stage to the 25% design stage. And I'm blanking out on what PRC stands for. Can someone, maybe from CPS, help me out with that? Project Review Committee. Well, it's an early part of the conception of a project. It's like when MassDOT gets almost its first look at it. And so it's between that and the 25% design stage that we saw the biggest increase. So we are thinking that if we only put program projects after that point, then we should have fewer or lower increase in costs. Costs still go up, by on average about 25%. But that's a much smaller increase than the roughly 75 to 100% increase that we see between the PRC stage and 25% design stage. The other thing we're going to do is have more touch points with the proponents of the project. So twice a year, once the project is programmed, and have update from them to make sure the project is on track. Because sometimes there is little progress between the first year program project is put on the tip and when it is just about to, well, when it's supposed to be going out to bid. And the delays can be problematic, if for no other reason than just the inflation rate, although there was some interesting analysis that shows how long a project is in the tip, doesn't necessarily correlate to it being way above cost. So it's less reason for concern in respect to cost but it is more of a concern with respect to programming because we only have so much money to spend. And if we are expecting the project to, go to bid in, let's say 2025 and it's not ready, then we have to kind of scramble, and then that can lead to problems, in 2026, 2027. And the last thing we're going to do is if a project, does go over the threshold that we've set, which I think is 25 million for larger projects and 20% maybe it is for smaller projects, then we will reevaluate them. And if we don't think that they are worth it, meaning that with the cost increase and the score that we give them for various metrics, then we will have the ability to take them off the tip. So that was a lot of talking, and I'm going to stop now. If you have any questions.
Yeah, I'll jump right in.
Sure.
I'm a little surprised to hear you say that touching base more often is still only twice a year. What is it typically right now?
Typically there's no set schedule for it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And actually, I'm a little concerned that twice a year might be a little much for them, so we'll see what happens. So.
Okay. And I think you may have answered my second part of that question, which was the every 6 months or so review that you're suggesting is not just about the costs, but also about readiness. Is that what I heard you say?
Yeah. How they're progressing along, because that's going to affect two sets of people. One is the municipal person that is dealing with the project, and the other is going to be CTPS, and so it all is a function of how many projects we have programmed. But I would say we have probably through the whole TIP, which is 5 years of projects, at least 20 projects programmed. And I think I'm being conservative on that. So now, that's 40 additional meetings in a year. And those meetings are going to be at least an hour. And so you got to fit that into CTPS's budget. And then I know what it's like on the municipal side. Everyone's already working as much as they can. And so now, you're giving them more work to do. So that's why I'm kind of like, twice a year, go for it. But if you get once a year and it's a really good update, then that may be sufficient.
I see what you mean.
Yeah. I think I see a hand up. Is that Amira?
Yeah.
Amira? No?
I just had a comment, Len,
Sure.
In regards to that meeting and the comment regarding to the evaluation. They did say that it was at the point in the design where they couldn't reevaluate the design. So they are kind of set at their percentage, and any type of review or evaluation wouldn't exactly pertain to the design of the program. So there can be different input, but there wouldn't really be structural change to what is already there. Is that fair to say?
Well, when you get to 25% design, I guess you could still add elements or take elements out. Uh, uh, you could do that. And and there may be cost increases as a result, but as long as you are keeping in touch, with the staff, then at least you wouldn't be penalized, for being out of touch. If the project went over the threshold, because one of the things one of the things we would do is if the project went over the threshold, the 20% threshold, and you hadn't been in touch with staff, then I think we would be hard pressed to keep the project on the tip. But if you did, then there would be a reevaluation. And let's say you added elements to the project or you took elements out and that increased the score of the project, then that would make it a more appealing project, in which case we would look more favorably on the cost increases. Am I answering your question?
I believe so. My concern is more in regards to the structure is sound in regards to the project. And I feel like a lot of the review will be on the finances, about just what the number is versus, the actual concept of redesign. So I just wanted to touch on that.
Yeah. Well, generally, that can have a really big change in the design, at 25%. That said, one of the distinctions that they made is that this is going to be at 25% before the project really hits the public. So it's going to be before the public hearing, and that was one of our concerns. Is that a lot of times when the public first becomes really aware of a project, that's when people begin to say, well, I like this, I don't like this, and there can be changes after that. And I don't know if there was an analysis to say, if the changes if the cost increases that we see after the 25% design stage are attributed to what comes out of hearings, or if it's attributed to other things, like for instance, with I think one of the rail trail projects, this cost went up a whole lot because they decided that the surface that they were going to lay down needed to be significantly different. And I think it was one of those cases where if we put down a better surface, then it'll last longer, but it costs a whole lot more. And so is it a function of the unexpected improvements, but not changing the design? Or is it that the design elements change once you have a hearing and you get more input from the public? So did that clarify things a little bit more, at least?
Yes,
Okay.
it did. Thank you.
Sure.
So a lot of this stuff happens at the MPO, as Lynn has described, and the MPO has a natural process that it's used for a long time, and Lynn is certainly familiar with it, and more familiar recently. On the larger project side, I would offer up the Green Line as an example of something that really went off the rails. And it was a bad contract structure. It was no compete initially. The designers ran to the opulent side on the station designs, which was inappropriate and too much cost. And the state suspended it for something like 2 years. And I think that was entirely appropriate. And then it was rethought, and a competitive bid went out with a much more modest design. And it's stayed pretty close to budget and pretty close to on time. I think for a big project, they've done a great job. And so I would offer that as an example of something that got out of hand for a number of reasons. One of them chiefly being that the state was not really familiar with large new transit projects at that point. They hadn't been done in a long time, so there was a learning curve. And the MPO, as Len has explained to us before, they have a total pot of money, so they have to be careful to use it as best they can. And what he just described in my mind is one of the ways they do that.
So, so the comment period, I think, ends in mid-October, and I don't know how the Rock wants to handle that. And on RTAC, which has a seat on the board, I represent us, and so you can tell me how you feel, and I can just report that through RTAC to the board, or we can write a letter. I think the former is sufficient, but that's primarily because I'm having a hard time imagining the bandwidth of writing a letter. And also I kind of know that if I write a letter, it's going to be pretty much me writing the letter and folks kind of going along with it or not, but if someone else wants to write the letter, then I'll be happy to help you out. But my point is that you got a voice, and you can say things that I don't agree with, and I will still make that statement known. And so whatever you think will be more effective. And of course, as individuals, you can always send letters. I guarantee you that every letter is read and every letter goes into the record, and people pay attention to all the letters, so it won't be in vain.
Yep.
That's it.
Guys, I gotta go. Sorry.
See you, Wig.
That's okay, Wig. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
So that's one of your longer CIF updates. We may not still be ahead of schedule.
No, I think we're still ahead of schedule. Let's let me switch back here. No, we are definitely still ahead of schedule by quite a bit.
Cool.
I will bring up my notes and summarize. You all don't have to necessarily read every word in here. That's more just to get it into YouTube for posterity. We spent quite a bit of time talking about the tragic death of, I believe it was a doctor who fell through the missing stairs near the JFK UMass station, which apparently are not MBTA stairs. It's not on MBTA property. We had a big discussion about the history of that particular station, how it evolved, where some of the different responsibility lies. There's a lot more to be determined, a lot more to be found out, I believe. We went from there into some discussions of plans for improving that particular station area, which is basically been bolted on again and again and again from, as I've noted here, a 1920s original station. It's never really been replaced. It's just been more added and added and added. Not necessarily saying that that's related to this issue with the stairs and the DCR ownership and lack of maintenance, but they all sort of float in the same continuum of issues and maintenance backlog. Moving ahead, talked about upticks in ridership. Jacob reported ridership up 20% in the past 2 weeks. Jonathan noted significant, well, he said noticeable increase in ridership, but Central Subway of the Green Line, which was the busiest in the entire system, was still lower than pre-COVID, but Sox game traffic does bring things back up to almost pre-COVID. Talked about dropped trips, hiring process and HR from Josh, as Melissa was alluding to earlier. The process of hiring is a big issue relating to service delivery and buses. Thank you again, Jacob, for the notes about the speed improvements on the E-line now that the Brigham Circle to Heath Street section has been finished. The last section was Brigham Circle to the corner, to the junction, to that sharp turn. 45 plus seconds might not seem like a lot, but as we discussed in the meeting, it's a significant improvement. Jacob talked about the Gloucester drawbridge supply chain issues. I don't think we have anything new on that project since that subcommittee. Yeah, go ahead, Jacob, please.
Actually, we do.
Awesome.
The T just released another one of their the T Gloucester drawbridge emails are really, really good and have lots of interesting pictures. So if you aren't already subscribed to that and are interested in this project, I really encourage you to be. Hang on, I'll pull up the email. South Coast Rail Construction.
You want to actually screen share it or just read from it?
I have it. I have it pulled up now. So if you can let me share my screen.
Yeah, absolutely. I will stop my share. Go right ahead.
Yes, great. Share screen. Host disabled participant screen sharing.
Oh, I thought I had covered that. Stand by. Okay, try that again.
Okay, share screen. There we go. Here, share. So what can y'all see right now?
We can see it.
Okay. Et cetera, et cetera. Hang on, let's. There.
Feel free to just summarize it.
August construction. This is the new control tower.
Visuals.
That's going on. They're continuing to install piers. It looks like the final two are coming along well. That's what these are. New southern track. New track is going in. New track has gone in. New track is going in. New track on the bridge. The last bits of bridge superstructure are going into place. This here, they're going to be opening one barrel of the bridge earlier. So the track here, they're going to be opening pretty soon. And this is the western span that's getting chunked in. Signals coming in. Gate. Yeah, so that's the project.
Excellent.
Just going back real quick to where the track work was laid there. The interesting thing is it looked awful close to the water, and I understand it's a drawbridge, goes over water. But just curious, while they're doing all this work, I'm curious if they did anything. Is that at the same grade level or not? You know, essentially, I'm trying to ask is, are they making it climate resilient or not, or did we just kind of replace the bridge?
I can answer that question. I can answer that question. That particular drawbridge span is something like 12 or more feet above mean high tide, I believe. I mean, don't quote me on the exact number, but yeah, it's pretty much up there. Yeah, I don't think we have
the bridge itself looked high. I was less concerned about bridge. There was a particular image. It was like the third or fourth image was of the tracks that precede or I guess before or after you get to the bridge seemed very much back down to grade level.
The last time I was up there, I remember looking quite a bit down at the ocean level. So yeah, I'd say that's one of. I mean, speaking as a commuter rail person living north of Boston and having taken that line quite a bit, I think that particular stretch where that Gloucester drawbridge is one of the least that concerns me. I mean, the stretch from Chelsea to Lynn at typical high tide is only about a foot above the water level, and that carries the Newburyport line as well as the Rockport line. So yeah, I mean, it's a great question to ask.
I've raised a good issue. I've just raised it at the wrong spot.
Well, yeah, the wrong spot on the line. Yeah,
Right.
I think I actually have somewhere. I can't pull it up now in a quick enough amount of time, but I have somewhere the analysis of where like the lowest areas on commuter rail are relative to flood projections. That's something I can dig up for the subcommittee if you like.
Yeah, let's add that as a subcommittee agenda item.
Sounds good. That's a good one. Yeah. And thank you again, Jacob, for sharing that. We talked about the 28, and since we're already coming up on 20 after, I will just leave this up on the screen. Talked about Route 28, the ride for, oh, actually, I will mention one thing in detail. The discussion that we had was whether or not the message is getting out to people riding the 28 during this trial of all-door boarding for the City of Boston paid pilot. The discussion was about whether or not there's enough messaging to tell people that they can just get on at any door, because there seemed to be some anecdotal evidence that people were still walking to the front as they always had, even though they didn't have to. Jacob, I saw your hand. Go ahead.
Again, this was one anecdote, meaning I rode the bus one time and saw a couple of people doing that. I imagine that now that it's been free for a month, behavior has changed. And if anyone on the rock can go out and ride the 28, I'd really encourage them to do that, just to get some new anecdotes.
Fair enough. Yeah, I will admit we don't want to put too much on your one report, but I took it as probably not a unique occurrence. Probably there were people under force of habit going to the front door, even though the other doors were open right in front of them. And I was speculating that if someone's at the rear of the bus and it's a 60-footer and they're in that habit, that could be, a relatively long walk to go from the back of a 60-foot bus all the way to the front just to go on that door. I think we came to the conclusion that it does need to have a site visit to see if there's sandwich boards or other messaging that it has already been put in, if anyone's noticed this. But I'll stop there. Oh, and thank you again, Jacob, for pointing out that the cloth covers were custom made to cover the fare boxes, which is a wonderful element for this trial, so that we don't have just the operator with their hand dangling over the control panel like so many other times. Go ahead, Jacob.
Thank you very much. I have to go real quick. But
okay, cool.
Yeah,
that's
see
fine.
you soon.
All right, no sweat.
Nice seeing y'all. Nice meeting you, Amira Patterson, and Sylvia Castellanos, and I will see you all soon. Bye, guys.
So long, JD.
Yeah, Jacob.
Toodles.
And I'll wrap up my subcommittee report by just pointing out this very interesting tidbit that was brand new to me, that there are biological, shall we say, impacts from the route that an operator is running that determine where the operator should be allowed to take a break. And the route planning takes into account the availability of a bathroom facility. I should say restroom facility, not bathroom. That, at least for me personally, that was something that I had never encountered in MBTA service planning, schedule planning. And it brought up the question that I put here is, well, what kind of facility is necessary? I mean, would the 589 members be up in arms if it was just a porta-john? Or is something like the Portland Loo a kind of a minimum standards? And does the MBTA ever foresee, and these are all questions we didn't answer, I believe, does the MBTA have the wherewithal or the budget to say, well, we really need to have this route have a layover here, so we're actually going to put in a facility for a rest stop in the form of something like a Portland Loo? It seems kind of unlikely, but I think it's not a 0% possibility. And then finally, GLX wrap up is on our list for an upcoming meeting. I think we said, Jacob just signed off, but I think we said that this would be worthy of doing for the fourth Tuesday of the month, the full meeting as we have tonight, have a presenter from GLX to give us a big overall wrap up of this huge project and say, from start to finish, successes, failures, lessons learned, etc. And that's something we are working on for a future meeting. Any questions on or more comments on the subcommittee that I've just covered? Craig and Len, did I miss anything? Anything significant?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, cool. Then I will pull this out of the way. Go ahead, Len.
No, that's me. I was saying I think you're fine. I had to leave early for that meeting too, so I only caught the first hour.
No problem. Unless there's any other reports on external meetings above and beyond what Len gave earlier, I've got 2 items of new business. Any old business we want to bring up? I don't want to linger in case people really don't want to leave early and jump over to the SLX meeting. So going once, going twice for any old business. Len?
No old business.
Any other external meeting mentions?
Nope.
Okay, cool. Then if you'll bear with me and feel free to object at this if you are so inclined. But I was asked by Kathy Curran on Channel 5 to comment on the tragic escalator accident. And I think I feel obligated to share this with you. Feel free to say, no, not important right now. If you feel like it's just being too self-serving, because I want to kick this off with a discussion of the situation and a couple of my concerns. So unless anyone yells, bear with me for this is a 2-minute, 46-second thing.
Top factor has always got to be safety. If the system is not safe, even if it's reliably delivering people from place to place, we wouldn't want to use it.
Safety, the top concern as investigators try to figure out what caused this escalator at the Back Bay T station to malfunction and go into reverse, sending commuters crashing to the bottom, injuring 9. The escalator shut down until further notice. According to this overview of the 2017 elevator and escalator maintenance agreement obtained by 5 Investigates, the Finnish company Kone was in charge of making sure the escalator was safe. It shows a 5-year deal with the MBTA for $42.5 million. The T asks the Fiscal and Management Control Board to award the contract to Kone for the purpose of maintaining the MBTA-owned elevators and escalators at the various stations and MBTA buildings in a safe and secure manner. Stefan Wunsch is with the MBTA Rider Oversight Committee.
Clearly, something was missed. Clearly, either an inspection missed a fault or an impending failure, or this was a material failure that was just so out of the blue that even an inspection wouldn't have caught it.
Recent years show the overall availability or in-service percentage of escalators across the system improving. There are 177 escalators system-wide. Back in 2005, T escalators were in service almost 91% of the time. Last week, almost 99%. The T alerts show 7, including the one involved in Sunday's incident, were unavailable today.
I'm concerned that the in-service hours rising up might indicate that inspections are either not being as thorough, or an inspection that finds a minor problem might not be taking that unit out of service until the repair. I don't know for sure, but that's a concern that I want to look into.
And the company can be hit with penalties if there are incidents or problems. We've requested Kone's penalty history, current contract, and inspection reports, but haven't received that from the T. In a statement, Kone tells us the safety and well-being of the public is their top priority, and they're working closely with authorities to determine what may have caused the incident. Kathy Curran, 5 Investigates.
What was that concern there, Stefan?
I said,
what,
go ahead.
What was it? Just please repeat it. That you're concerned that the in-service is indicative of not doing inspections, or that you're missing stuff.
I'm concerned that the rising in-service hours might be indicative of some lesser detail being given to the inspections. I don't want to believe that. I don't want to think that, but given that this was about as catastrophic of a failure as can possibly happen to an escalator, I want to make sure that that's not the case. And I'm not casting aspersions. I'm not making false accusations. I'm simply saying I want to make sure that the level of detail of escalator and elevator inspections is still up to what they are supposed to be. Just one more quick thing. I mean, the accident that happened at Back Bay was basically the equivalent of an elevator cab just dropping straight down, free fall. What happened at Back Bay was a free fall escalator, and that is not supposed to happen, if I understand it right, by redundant safety systems. There should never be the stair revolving, I can't think of the right word for it, but that revolving chain of steps is never supposed to be allowed to just free fall down under the weight of passengers. And the fact that it did is it's as bad as it can get for an escalator.
I think Lennon and I are strangely aligned on this. I think you're a little wildly speculative in your an alarmist in your interview a little bit. I appreciate you going on and talking to him, but it was, I think you started drawing conclusions that are kind of fuel these kind of investigative reports.
Well, I apologize if I was seeming to making any conclusions. I didn't want to be going there.
Why did you say like a possible terrorist event? I mean,
because that's not realistic.
Well, it's about as realistic as anything could be, really.
I think it's realistic that the quality of inspections could have decreased. I think that is not beyond a reasonable thing to question, at least.
Yeah, but
I think my answer to, and we can move on off this, is
okay.
My guess is more things are in service because ridership is down.
Yeah.
So you have essentially less usage.
Yes.
You don't have escalators break because you have people stomping on them all day long. And so if there's nobody in a station, and it can run cleanly without any load on it. You've essentially you get a lot better miles to the gallon if you don't if you don't load up your car with a truck with a whole bunch of weight. You can run an escalator a whole lot longer with less problems if there aren't people stomping on it all day long.
Okay.
So, the conclusion I would get, and that's once again, that's me being speculative here. So let me, but I would draw that conclusion before I would draw the conclusion of a nefarious plot to do less inspections and keep them keep the system in use to pad percentages.
Oh, I'm not even saying it would be a deliberate oversight in the inspection. I'm just saying that could be related. I'm not saying it's deliberate. It could be, but I'm not. That's not my primary. That's not my primary assertion here. But let me take what you said, Craig, and take that in another direction. The fact that an escalator failed in as catastrophic a way as it can possibly fail during the time of COVID-19 work from home and reduced ridership, I think is even more problematic. I mean, what if there were regular crowds, wouldn't that seem to indicate
Sure.
that there'd be a
So
higher likelihood?
what we have to look at is we have to look at that specific unit to see when it was last inspected. And we also have to understand what caused the failure, right? So you can't, if they can, I don't think they've ruled that. I don't think we need to pinpoint that a little bit more. And then you can back into, should it have been caught during an inspection?
I completely agree. Yes.
And
Absolutely right.
Are you also calling into question the quality of the inspections, Stefan?
Oh yeah, I think they go hand in hand. I think, well, Kathy Kern,
once again, I don't think you know that until you understand what caused the inspection or what caused the failure.
Correct.
And then understand if that's something that could be caused in a normal, if that's something that could have been caught during a normal inspection. And then if it was caught, was that on the normal inspection list for Koenig? And then when was that inspection done? There's a whole lot of things you have to kind of prove out first before the accusation comes in to say.
Oh yes.
Because there's a chance it wasn't a cone problem. It was whoever the manufacturer of the escalator was, and they used faulty bolts.
Yep,
You would never
exactly.
catch
Yep.
during an inspection because they're just a bad material.
Exactly right. And I mentioned that
could have gone wrong with that you can't.
Exactly.
You don't know until you do the proper investigative work.
Precisely. And in my defense, a little bit, I did mention that in one of the parts that made air was that I said, was this a failed
Material
inspection,
failure.
or a material failure that would not have been picked up? Right. I mean, there are such things as hairline cracks in steel that can't be detected other than, an ultrasound, or at least on railroad tracks, they can do it's kind of like a magnetic resonance kind of a thing, as well as ultrasound. Yeah, I want to know more about to what degree are those deeper inspections done. And I mean, are we looking at something where the inspections aren't in alignment with a change in material? For all we know, the type of inspection was defined 5 years ago when the contract was renewed. And in the intervening years, the type of material, or like a vendor supplier, was changed, and somehow they got out of sync. I mean, if Fred's company is making bolts and the inspection is geared towards Fred's bolts, and then a couple of years later it becomes Tim's bolt company, and the inspection doesn't get realigned to accommodate for the new vendor's bolts, we could have a problem there. But I'm ready to move on to another topic in the interest of time, and I don't want to belabor the point. And for the record, again, my apologies if sharing that video here in the committee seemed a bit self-serving. I didn't want that to be the case. I really genuinely thought that was something that I should share with you.
No, it wasn't that it was self-serving. It's just that I find what you said being problematic. I understand your defense, but it doesn't leave a good taste in my mouth. So,
okay, I apologize.
I'm glad to know about it. No, don't apologize. You defended yourself. And I am willing to conclude that I'm wrong about this. I'm just giving you my take on it. So I'm assuming my honest take. I'm not going to tell you not to do something like that, because you are defending yourself, and I appreciate that, but it's so let me think about it more myself. I'm glad you did it, I'm glad you showed us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Now moving on, I don't have I'm not going to do any kind of a multimedia show, but you probably all heard also about just earlier today around 9:45, I believe it was, a red line train derailed and caused, I think it's still an ongoing all-day outage. I just wanted to put out there that is something that I want to bring up at our next subcommittee and solicit any information that anybody else has. I checked in with a couple different people, and there was one theory that the third rail was out of alignment and actually caused the train to jump the tracks. There was something else that mentioned something about a train moving not under manned control, but these are just, it's still kind of coming in from rumor. I don't want to say rumors, but has anybody else heard anything so far on this derailment today?
Oh, could it be an inspection issue? I'm sorry.
That's fine. That's fine. That's a perfectly fine job, Len. I'm not going to give you any crap about that. That's fine. Excuse me.
Len's very thorough, you know.
Yeah,
very thorough.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm making fun of myself as much, you know. But also, I mean, and Wig had brought this up. It's like, well, we're hearing about all these things. I think he was thinking about the escalator, the derailment, possibly being the falling death, being and saying, you know, this is probably, you know, symptomatic, you know, of a system that is a systemic failure. And I hear where he's coming from, and we can toss in. I think that there was a lightning hit at Wellington today, you know, that affected the Orange Line, you know, and I know that these clusters can often make it seem like there's a systemic problem, and sometimes it's hard to tease out the clustering that happens from randomness, because one of the features of randomness is clustering versus a systemic problem. Certainly when something's happening at a regular basis that is almost predictable, then you can say you have a systemic problem. But it's hard when you get these clusters to say that it's systemic versus just a whole bunch of random things that have causal factors, that you can attribute to problems with the system, but that it doesn't indicate, you know, that the system's about to collapse. You know, we go through these periods where we just have lots of bad things happening, but that's a complicated system. You know, lots of parts that move and sometimes don't move, and so let's just try to get to the bottom of each of them and try to, you know, figure out how to stop them from repeating. And yes, it would help to have a lot more funds. So, and he was like, what do we do about this? You know, what we do is we try to elect people who will provide, you know, the resources that we need to make our transit and our transportation system work better.
I will volunteer one thing about the lightning strike causing the signal outage, as I believe it was reported. I'm very disappointed in that, because the Orange Line just recently had the signal systems, if I understand it correctly, and if I remember correctly, completely redone. I thought that the Orange Line from roughly North Station all the way up to Wellington and Oak Grove had all the signal elements replaced to be state-of-the-art, to be modern. And lightning protection for transit systems is not something new. I mean, lightning protection has been around basically since Ben Franklin, and then that's not really an exaggeration. So, I mean, well, case in point, if I understand it right, part of the reason why commuter rail positive train control is using fiber optics between the different control points is partly because fiber optics are simpler than a lot of big bundle of copper wires. You can carry more data over it, but also fiber optics inherently don't conduct electricity. So my understanding is that the fiber optic based positive train control system gives a level of immunity to lightning strikes far more than a copper wire based system. So having the Orange Line signals recently redone and still we've got a lightning strike outage, I'm bothered by that.
Well, I mean, it depends on how the nature of the strike, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
I agree.
So we have to find out what the nature what the nature of the strike is. So I mean, it could be something inadequate. It could be that if you have a direct strike, that is away from the means of protecting, then you'll get it. Now the question then is, can you protect every vulnerable point? I don't know. I mean, if your argument is that you can, then let's find out why they didn't. I mean, if you can't, and it hit that point, well, then what do you do?
I mean, it's always cost benefit analysis.
Yeah.
You know, we could spend $1 bazillion and protect against every single outage, or make better use of that bazillion dollars and have an acceptable level of risk. Absolutely. Oh yeah. That's completely logical thinking and important to analyze it that way.
I just don't know what any more detail than it was a hit. So you clearly know more than I do at this point. So
not about the specifics of this case, just that the signals on the orange line were very recently replaced.
Okay.
And that protection against lightning strikes is not new.
Right. Gotcha.
Okay. I think we've covered that. And any other old business, new business? Otherwise, I heard interest in ending early to switch over to another meeting. I'm okay with that. Let me just make a quick check on the YouTube stream, see if anybody, for the benefit of anyone on the meeting, either listening on YouTube, there are some people listening on YouTube. That's great to see. And other people who are attendees. Anyone want to make a public comment? You can either raise your hand in the Zoom, or if you're on YouTube, you can type it into the live chat on YouTube. Or if you're in Zoom, you can use the Zoom chat or Q&A. I'll give people like another 30 seconds. That there's a little bit of a lag in the Zoom getting to YouTube, but after another minute or so. Hey, Karen, do you want to make a quick, anything else to say, I should say? I had to mute you earlier, Karen. Sorry, I didn't have noticed it. I had to mute you because there was some background noise. Do you want to say a last thing?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yep, go right ahead.
No, everything's good. I think at some future meeting, I'd like to bring up the fact that a lot of the bus stops don't have any place to sit. And as an elderly person, I can't stand and wait for the bus. So since I usually wear old jeans or chinos or something, I sit on the ground on the sidewalk. Very unladylike.
That's a very good point. Yeah. Yeah, Karen, do you think will you be able to join the standing committee, the operations subcommittee?
Yes, I think so. It's
okay.
It's in the second
Tuesday
in October.
Exactly right. Yep.
Yeah.
We'll make sure we cover that.
Yeah. Someone to be sit and covered. And I think, the only objection should be that there's just not space. There shouldn't be a case where a business or someone says, I don't like having a covered bus stop in front of my place. That just shouldn't be acceptable for why we don't have it. There's not space, not space, but it shouldn't be, I don't like the way it looks, No,
it doesn't have to be covered, even if it's just a bench.
I want covered. I want covered.
The winter's coming.
Yeah, but you know what? I'd rather have a bench, and if I have a choice between a bench or anything and nothing, I'd rather have the bench. Sure, I'd love the covered, but the other issue with the covered is the one at Queen Story. A lot of the alcoholics sit in it, so it's useless for a bus passenger.
Right. Well, yeah, I agree. Bench rather than no bench, but covered would be great. And while we're at it, let's try and deal with the homeless population. But I hear you. You're being pragmatic.
These people aren't homeless. They're just alcoholics because there's a liquor store right at Queensbury in Jersey.
Gotcha. I understand.
I see.
I understand.
Okay. Yep. Oh, Amira, you're muted. Did you want to say? Go right ahead.
Sheltered space, sheltered area for people to take advantage of. Yeah.
Right.
But thank you, Karen.
Yeah, thank you. And by the way, Karen, you keep claiming that you're elderly, but I don't believe you.
Well, I was born in 1938. I think you can do the math.
I don't believe it. Good for you, though.
Hey, July 5th, 1938. My mother said it was like shitting a watermelon.
Bless you.
I love it.
Karen.
Sylvia, I saw your hand up for a minute. Please go right ahead.
I just wanted to let Karen know, and as well as for the people who are watching, that if you have any anything that you want to say that's pressing, you can go ahead and send it to the public engagement team at publicengagement@mbta.com. And we'll go ahead and receive your email, and we'll go ahead and talk with y'all. That's our job. We talk to the writers. So that's that.
That's great. Sylvia, would you mind putting that into the Zoom chat so it's a little more visible?
Of course. And
great.
also go ahead and put my own emails. That way people have access to that if they want to talk or anything.
Oh, yes, please. Yeah. Yeah. And Sylvia, thank you again for joining us. It was it's a great surprise to have you on board. And yeah. And please tell Anthony that he's doing a great job and we're thrilled for him in his new position, relatively new.
I'm going to make a motion to adjourn.
Yeah.
I don't see any comments on YouTube, and Sylvia just dropped in the email, so that's now on the record. So I will second. Yeah, I will second Craig's motion to adjourn a little bit early because I'm going to jump over to the Silverline extension meeting that's in process. Thank you, Amira, for joining us. What a pleasure to have you on board. Thank you, Sylvia.
Bye-bye.
Len and Blake and Karen, thank you. And thanks, Craig.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Take
Good
care.
night. See you next time.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.